Hey there, I'm just a guy having fun at the range. Today we're off the range to work on some dry practice. So let's build those dry practice skills. Once you've mastered the basic manipulations with your firearm in dry practice, you can start to use dry practice to hone some of the other skills involved with marksmanship. Of course, the primary skills that you want to be focusing on in dry practice are going to be your trigger press and other manipulations of your firearm. You can also use dry practice to work on presentation as well as malfunction clearing. Another two skills that you can work on in your dry practice regimen is loading the firearm. Now, of course, we have our administrative load where we actually put our magazine in and run the slide to load the firearm first thing before a live fire drill. But then during that live fire drill or during competition, during combat, you're going to need to be able to replenish your firearm. Now, there's a couple of different reloads that we would do. A tactical reload is something that we do when there is still ammunition in the firearm, but we want to add additional ammunition to the firearm. So for example, in a competition, as we're moving between stages, we may not have run our firearm completely dry, which is a good thing, but we want to make sure that we have as much ammunition in the firearm as possible before we begin our next string of fire. So in order to do what we call a tactical reload, we're going to make sure that we have another magazine readily available. Now, if you're in competition and you have a set of magazine holsters on your belt, that's a great place to put these. If you carry a firearm for personal protection and you carry your backup magazine inside of a pocket or in an inside the waistband holster or wherever you carry it, go ahead, stage that magazine, an empty magazine, mind you, in that location. Okay? A tactical reload involves retaining the magazine that is inside of the firearm and putting another magazine in. We retain it because if this has 5 bullets left in it, those 5 bullets may be key later on in the competition or the fight, and we don't necessarily want to just drop those on the ground. So no matter how many rounds I have in that magazine, I'm going to go ahead and pull it out, and I'm going to put it somewhere on my person that I can get to later. I like to stick it into my back pocket because I can kind of stick my finger into the back pocket and get it right there, and it's a convenient place for me to grab it again. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and retain that in my back pocket, and I'm going to go ahead and grab a new magazine and insert it. Now realize during this entire process I have a loaded round inside the chamber. So if all of a sudden, if this is a self-defense encounter and I need to get one more round off, even in the middle of my tactical reload, I can fire one round. It's the only round that I'm going to get until I get that magazine in the firearm, but one is better than none. Again, let me set up for the tactical reload. Empty magazine available to me. I'm going to go ahead and eject and retain the magazine that I pulled out of my firearm and insert the next magazine. Okay? Again, set that up. So here it is on my belt. I'm going to eject and retain and insert that magazine. Now let's say that I've been using this magazine for a while in my competition, and all of a sudden I realize I'm running low on ammo. Okay? Maybe I haven't run out completely, but I'm running low on ammo. I still have that magazine in my back pocket. I'm going to go ahead and take this one out, put it somewhere else on my body, grab that one, put it back in, and hopefully now I have more ammo than I did before. So that's why we retain it, because we can use it again. All right? So again, I'm going to set that up for my ideal scenario, which is to have a magazine in an easily accessible place, typically on my belt. If you're concealed carry, you oftentimes put it in an appendix holster. I'm going to leave mine right on the belt there. It's easy to grab. So I've got one magazine in the gun, strip and retain, and insert the next one. All right? Let me do it this way so you can see kind of what that looks like from the side perspective. All right? So I'm going to go ahead, stage one magazine on my belt, and check for the magazine, strip and retain, insert the magazine. All right? Stage one on my belt, strip and retain, and insert. All right? And as you get more and more familiar with that, you can start to pick up speed. So as I have one on my belt, I'm going to go ahead, strip and retain, insert. All right? Let me do it facing this way as well. Go ahead, put one magazine on my belt. All right? I'm going to go ahead, strip and retain, and insert. All right? So that way I can kind of top off my firearm, get as many rounds into my firearm as I need or as I can possibly hold, so that I'm ready for whatever comes next. Okay? Now that's the ideal solution, the tactical reload. Your firearm isn't completely empty, you've got some rounds left and you're just topping it off. The worst case scenario is when you run your gun dry, meaning that you have expended all of the rounds inside of your firearm and the slide is now locked to the rear on an empty magazine. This is going to be a malfunction that we're going to need to diagnose. We're not necessarily going to notice that our slide is locked to the rear, but what we are going to notice is that we have a dead trigger. Just like our Type 2 and Type 3 malfunctions, we're going to be able to feel that the trigger is not responding the way that we want to. So much like our Type 2 and our Type 3, we get that dead trigger, we're going to go ahead and look and move. And what we're going to see is the follower of the magazine. Now for most magazines that's going to be a black follower. For many of the newer magazines it's orange or red, some color that very clearly indicates you don't have a round in that chamber. A little bit easier on the eyes to see than just a black magazine follower. So when I look and move and I see that, I need to think I need to get more ammunition in the gun. So in order to get more ammunition in the gun, I'm going to go ahead and get the magazine out of the firearm and put a new magazine in. But I don't necessarily want to eject this magazine if in fact I don't have anything else to put into the firearm. Because all that does is put my magazine on the ground. Now if I'm in competition and I have no more ammo, the competition is over. I don't have any options, so there's no sense throwing my magazine in the dirt and getting it all dirty. Okay? If I'm in the middle of a firefight, I don't necessarily want to advertise the fact that I'm empty by tossing a magazine on the ground and then fumbling around with my gun, noting that I'm not putting one back in. So I'm going to go ahead and begin by checking to see if I have a magazine available before I do anything with the magazine in the firearm. So with an empty magazine in the firearm, I look and move, I check to see if I have a magazine. Now as soon as my hand comes down on the base plate of the magazine, I'm going to eject the magazine that is in the firearm so that as I bring my magazine out, it goes right into the firearm and I'm ready to go. And I can drop the slide either with the slide release lever or by racking the slide. So let's set that up again. I'm going to lock the slide back on an empty magazine. I'm going to trip my trigger so that I get that dead trigger. And now as I'm pointed in, dead trigger, look and move. See the follower of my magazine. I'm going to check to make sure that I have a magazine to put into the gun. As soon as my hand hits that, I press on that slide release lever. I press on that magazine release lever, which drops the magazine out. And now I can go ahead and insert a new magazine and either press down on my slide stop lever or rack my slide in order to get back on target with a loaded firearm. Now I can practice this without a magazine. It's not quite as effective, but I can do it just by looking, moving, envisioning that, pretending to grab a magazine, pretending to release, putting a magazine in, and racking the slide. Okay? But that doesn't necessarily work on the skill of getting a magazine into the firearm. So I like to use a couple of empty magazines, locking it back on those empty magazines, making sure that I'm staged the way that I want to be on my belt, look and move. Oh, that was rough. And back on target. Alright, set that up again. Look and move. Feel, hit, in, down. There we go. That was a little bit better. Right? And I'm going to work through that slowly so I can start to think through all of the operations so that I can make it work exactly the way that I want it to work. Okay. So there we go. We've just worked through the reloads that you're going to do with a firearm. Your tactical reload, which is simply one out, one in. Okay? Retaining that magazine before you put another magazine into the firearm. Your emergency reload, dead trigger, look and move, see the black follower or the orange follower of your magazine. Feel for a magazine. As soon as you feel that magazine, drop the magazine out of the gun and a new magazine goes into the gun and you drop your slide, either with a slide stop lever or by racking the slide. So there's another few things that you can work on with dry practice to get your skills better so that you can respond reflexively to whatever your firearm does or doesn't do correctly.